Breaking the gray.
Sarah, it was very nice to see you yesterday in person. That was like such a treat.
Yes. A rare in the flesh meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. California sunshine.
We've had two, and both of those two times have been in the 408 area code. So the South Bay of the Bay Area, we're just sort of dotting our way around, and maybe someday you'll come up north to the northern part of the Bay Area. So it was great to see you, though, and you look radiant. The sun is shining on you. How are you feeling today?
Pretty good. Yeah. I've been out and done my sunrise yoga outside in lovely Gilroy. Bit foggy. But yeah, it's nice to be here. And I'm really excited to have our guest on today because we've recently spoken to Carrie Bennett, who talked to us about quantum biology, and it was one of our most popular episodes. So now we have Corey Ghazvini on, but who's going to talk to us again about quantum biology. So welcome, Corey. It's really lovely to have you on today.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity, and I look forward to seeing some of the information we can come across today. I know you guys have a great channel with a lot of great fans and a lot of great people coming together. That's really cool that you did yoga at the sunrise this morning, actually. I was doing the exact same thing, and any other day of the week, I typically do Tai Chi, but that's not on the agenda today. So somewhere out there, our moments were entangled.
They were. That's good to know. A little bit later, maybe, because the sun here in Gilroy was about 7 o'clock today. It's getting later and later.
Well, that's the epitome of time being relevant.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Corey, I've done a little bit of research. I don't want to give up too much of what I know about you because I'd love for you to sort of speak for yourself. But I read things like healing and acupuncture and health coaching, longevity. I would love to know myself, and for our audience too, like, what is your specialty? What do you really specialize in? What's your superpower and your interests that really brought you here?
Well, I am a board certified acupuncturist and Chinese herbologist. And I think most of the people that are involved in my side of the natural medicine sphere get involved because we are deeply intertwined and connected to deciphering the message that is Mother Nature. And I think Chinese medicine is the epitome of that representation because of the fact that they didn't have a lot of tools to do any of the measurements that they were doing. And they didn't have any other bias other than nature itself. And so what Chinese medicine really is the purest form of observation of how nature unfolds and how nature can express itself in the form of a human being, and how each of the different elements of nature play back and forth between the organism and the environment.
It's such a beautiful way to put it. And I've always thought long, and Sarah and I have talked about this too, that experimentation has gone on for so long that there was so many failures in there, and failure in experimentation and not knowing what was happening to your body in some cases meant death. It meant like you didn't survive eating those red berries in the forest. But I'm curious, in your mind, what have you found that has really formed you as a person in Chinese medicine and Eastern medicine?
For me, realistically, I only began to scratch the surface with my formal education, and it wasn't until I got to my last semester that I ultimately realized that my deepest inquiries are not going to be answered here. And so I sort of took it upon myself to just come to the decision that I don't care what happens, I'm going to figure out what all of this really means and how it actually works. And really it came around full circle after learning a lot about some really in-depth microbiology and also macrocosmic biology and electromagnetism as far as it affects quantum biology from Dr. Jack Kruse, that Chinese medicine really hit the nail on the head when they discovered the fact that the body has electrical mechanisms, and they call the electricity a form of qi. And qi has many different forms, but it consolidates into what is the body. And so you have to come to this more expansive idea that, our bodies themselves are not just a separate entity. They are actually nature's most divine expression, like I said before. And so it wasn't until the 1960s that a guy by the name of Robert O. Becker actually started to use modern tools to dismantle all of the different aspects of how minor currents of DC electricity can actually be measured in the body, not only from a therapeutic standpoint, but just from an operational standpoint, that electromagnetism is exactly how life works. So when you learn the specifics of how that comes to play, then you sort of take a step back and then you realize that life is the most psychedelic thing that we could actually experience, be all of these different things that people do to sort of expand their mind. The reality that we live in is by far hyper real. In a way that way I can describe that is ultimately we are no different than an electric android that is wirelessly tethered to our environment. And the main way that us as an organism can obtain energy is actually via electromagnetic energy, which dominantly comes from the sun. We also utilize different forms of waves of energy like the Schumann resonance and the magnetic fields of the earth. But in all reality, it's like a Wi-Fi signal that programs all of the hardware inside of us. One of those forms of hardware could be viewed as DNA. And that epigenetic software that the Chinese called qi is exactly how all of evolution's processes unfold before us. And we've put ourselves in a situation to where we're now coming to the realization as a collective educated species that all of the things that we've been taught for the last 150, 200 years about biology that we think are revolutionary are actually horseshit. And we're actually being led into Plato's cave. I don't know how familiar you guys are or any of the listeners are with Plato's allegory of the cave, in which the people inside the cave wanted to believe that the shadows on the wall were more real than the actual sunlight and all of nature outside the cave.
Sarah's nightmare. Sarah's absolute nightmare.
It's actually most people's nightmare. Most people go their entire lives without actually waking up until you can get yourself on the internet and do some productive digging, and you actually start to learn how many of the things that you think are true are actually completely untrue. Like, for example, we could go back and realize that the pharmaceutical industry is sort of like the god of health and wellness. I mean, the amount of money that's spent in the United States for the regular citizens to be able to so-called maintain health is astronomical, and it's higher than most countries' entire GDP. But the fact of the matter is, the only reason we believe any of the shit that they have to say is because Alexander Fleming discovered antibiotics in, 1929? And that wasn't even something that they were able to actually create themselves. Mother Nature is something that created, and he observed that in his lab accidentally. And so pretty much since then, that has allowed for their sector of wellness to thrive in the ways of surgery. And don't get me wrong, surgery is by far the most advanced form of medicine that we've ever come up with. Nature works, but in the event that you get a severe injury or you have a deformity or, some emergency happens to come awry, like there are certain situations where you have no other option but to get surgery. And it is antibiotics that allowed for us to be able to successfully figure out how to do that. And then you go even further and you start to unfold some more of the things that we think about health. Just another example, calories in, calories out. The idea that we can maintain our best metabolism by regulating the amount of calories that we consume. Where did that actually come from? That story actually started from, I think Coca-Cola was the company that originally funded all of the research for the entire paradigm of calories in, calories out, because they were being called out on how many young children were becoming obese by consuming their products. And so the story just could go on and on whenever you look at some of the things that people are taught, not only in basic education and in health class, whenever they're in elementary school, middle school, and high school, but downright into the most advanced nutritional research is all a huge Ponzi scheme. And the internet's proving to us, we're proving to ourselves that we actually have better information than some of the most so-called reliable resources out there.
Well, I was just thinking, if it's not about calories and it's not kind of the healing the way it is, maybe we should go a little bit into what you do think that is. Because, I know you talked about being connected to the electromagnetic fields, but most people, don't quite understand, what are the electromagnetic fields? You've mentioned the Schumann resonance, but we're also surrounded by all of the technology that has electromagnetic fields, different kinds of light, not just the sunlight. So if we kind of accept that we've kind of gone, as humans, strayed off the path a little bit with regards to all this ancient knowledge that we've built up by the Chinese and by other cultures, and now we've gone down this kind of offshoot route, maybe a dead end. What is the solution then? Because a lot of people want to, it's okay, the drugs are not working, but what will work, and how do people learn to integrate into their own electromagnetic fields or with those around them?
Yeah, like I said, electromagnetic fields are what biology uses to express and unfold evolution. Human beings being the apex solution to all of Mother Nature's problems. So you have to realize how highly sensitive we are to every single electromagnetic wavelength that's possible. And just like you brought up, over the last 100 years, we've began to create artificial wavelengths of energy that are saturating our environment, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, which is why, I don't know, I'd like to hope that a lot of the people that are here, and neither one of you guys are using something like Wi-Fi or any kind of Bluetooth devices, but I certainly am not. And I wouldn't use that unless I was put in a situation where I absolutely had to. So that's why I use hardline Ethernet. See, the way it really works is our mitochondria are not only the energy powerhouse of the cell, but they're actually the cell's electromagnetic antenna. And because of the way that water absorbs and stores electromagnetic energy, which, like we were talking about earlier, you're really just a water bag that is creating a battery out of itself. And it's a place for electrons to rest as they go from an excited state back down to a ground state. And it does that through the exclusion zone of water. But not only that, like I was talking about, the mitochondria are the antenna. Through that water, we actually tether energy and information, because in physics, information and energy are one and the same. So it's not only how we power ourselves, but it's actually how we undergo specific processes at a subcellular level. So when you bring up the fact of non-native electromagnetic fields, what are you really doing? You're basically putting in information that has no business to the biological system. And this isn't the best example, but it's kind of like you're implementing a virus into the hardware, into the software. And that software is being confused because it doesn't have the adequate information it does. So then it gets overridden by inflammation. And that's exactly what happens when we're exposed to radiation. And we call it non-native electromagnetic fields, right? By that, I mean cell phone radiation, Wi-Fi radiation, Bluetooth radiation. But why are we calling it even electromagnetic? We should just call it what it is. It's actually radiation. So anytime when you drive by a school and you see a cell tower there, you should understand that it's radiation. If you're using a Wi-Fi router, you actually have a high-powered radiation device in your home. None of those things were exposed to biology since over 100 years ago. And over 100 years ago, you really didn't see anyone dying from chronic disease. The way that people usually died was from severe injury or from infections were the two most common ways that people died. And like we said before, because the pharmaceutical industry luckily came across the solution to both of those problems, we were able to spread out the life expectancy to be able to almost meet up entirely with lifespan, because some people get life expectancy and lifespan actually confused. Human beings have always lived to be around 80 or 85 years old. Holy, even back in Roman times, Greek times. But ultimately, because of the different risks that humans had to face, we were not actually reaching life expectancy. So nowadays, we can actually reach life expectancy utilizing some of the things that we have. Also, starvation was a big deal, right, for ancient human beings. And so we don't actually have that problem anymore.
No, just the opposite usually.
Yeah, actually, the best information we have now is actually showing that starvation is pretty much non-existent for human beings anymore. Actually, the only time that humans actually face starvation is generally because of different political reasons, which is a damn shame when you think about it that way. But all of the issues that we have now are due to chronic inflammation. And the primary drivers for that is not only radiation in our environment, but it's number one thing that human beings have forgotten how to do adequately is sleep. And all of these different things that put us into overdrive, not only mentally and emotionally, but downright on the subcellular level, because we know that non-native electromagnetic frequencies put the cell into a stress state. That was proven without a doubt by Andrew Marino and Robert Becker in their lab. But whenever you don't adequately sleep, all of your detoxification programs get back-ended, and you never actually undergo regeneration like you're actually designed to do. I'm still listening.
Yeah, and I'm curious about sleep. And Sarah and I have talked a lot about sleep and regeneration. I'd love to hear your approach to sleep and what you look at for like optimal sleep. We've talked to Molly McLaughlin. We've talked to others. We talked to the anti-aging bed team last week. What do you find to be an optimal amount of sleep? And we all have our Oura rings now, which is probably giving us radiation through our fingers, which is fine. But at least I'm tracking my sleep, and now I know what my REM sleep is and my deep sleep is. I know that I'm scoring my sleep, and I'm in the 80s and 90s where I used to be in the 60s and 70s, and I've really focused on it. But what would you consider good sleep, and how do you tap into good sleep in your mind?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that Oura ring, because I just want to point out how hilarious it is that the most primordial function that we actually have, because life actually evolved from sleep. The quiescent organisms existed before we evolved wakefulness. Yet we have so much technology that we are so far gone from our natural design that we need to buy a fucking device to learn how to go to sleep.
Do we actually, I want to jump real quick. Do we think that humans actually hibernated? Were we a hibernating species, or were we not? I've always wondered about that.
Human beings actually, they evolved the ability to not have to undergo hibernation because we actually can undergo such a deep sleep every single night if you do it appropriately and regularly. But yeah, when it comes back to optimal sleep, it's not a one-size-fits-all discussion whenever you get asked the question, how much sleep do you really need? Because it depends on a lot of things. It depends on how good the person's environment is. And it also just depends on their own physiological condition. Because some people have spent the past, 20 years doing so much crazy shit that their bodies are so in such bad shape that they may need 10 or 12 hours of sleep every single night. It depends on so many different things, how well their liver detoxification is, how well hydrated they are, how much exercise they're doing, how well they can mitigate stress and things like that. There are certain people that could probably go a lot less than the average, considering how much they pay attention to mitigating stress and how much they avoid a lot of inflammation from, artificial food and shit in their environment. But, it really all comes down to how well your memory and cognition is working and how much energy you feel like you have and how you feel when you wake up in the morning. If you feel like you got hit by a train, or you feel like, you need to find a stimulant to get yourself going, and you need a nap, or you feel like you sort of have frustrated or agitated emotions, that is the surefire sign. Those are the signs that your sleep probably sucked. Not only that, anytime someone has inadequate health markers, like you're suffering from a lot of what one would describe as autoimmune conditions, like you see a lot of sensitivity to allergens, or you have a lot of different sensitivities to different types of foods, or you're easily triggered by small things that happen that tend to really stress you out, that also would tell you that your sleep sucks.
How do you deal with that from like a clinic point of view? Like, how would you deal with that in your clinic if you've got someone who's obviously lacking sleep? And I'm quite interested in how you tally up the Eastern medicine with the quantum biology, because, obviously, like, it's a traditional Chinese medicine. They didn't have the learnings about the microbiome and mitochondria and quantum biology. So how do you kind of integrate the two things in your own clinical practice?
First of all, I think the way you ask the question is actually backwards. You should ask yourself, how does quantum biology meet up with Chinese medicine? Because what quantum biology is really trying to do is reverse engineer what the fuck we already know, and learn how to find ways to describe it in more modern terms. Because let's face it, we need an extravagant explanation of things before we can be convinced. And just like the example of the Oura Ring, our perspectives are so hijacked into consumerism that we all, and I speak to myself when I say this because I'm still trying to dismantle this brainwashing, that we need to purchase and or use and or take something in order to achieve anything when it comes to health, not realizing that the default system works absolutely perfect.
A push-up. You could do a push-up right here, and that's just as good as lifting weights and going to the gym. Push-ups and sit-ups, crunches. I have my own body, and I have a floor and arms, so I can do those things, right? But it is a great point, and I think some of those practical things that you teach are important, because I think what we've learned in doing, at least what I've learned in doing this, and from you as well, Corey, is that taking personal responsibility and kind of owning it and not relying on what I'm told and what I hear and what I'm sold, but listening and learning and kind of going through the experimentation. And so how do you put those things into practice? And what do you prioritize as practice? So sleep is one. That's great. What about Chinese medicine? Are there things there that we can prioritize and kind of put first that we can, start doing. Sarah loves mushrooms.
Yeah, mushrooms are incredibly medicinal. Actually, one of the best things about mushrooms is that you can eat mushrooms year round, pretty much no matter where you are, and you're not creating a circadian mismatch. So mushrooms are really huge, really high in B vitamins, and I'm give 2 thumbs up to all kinds of mushrooms. They're a really healthy thing for people to add into their diet. And so, yeah, when it comes down to it in the clinical practice, I prioritize patient education because I figured out a long time ago, whenever I was doing my internship before I actually graduated, that the patients that I could convey the right information to, if they actually followed through with it, would truly get better. But the patients that just continued the same lifestyle that got them onto my table in the first place got minuscule results. And it would take them 10 times longer to get results, and they wouldn't maintain them either. And so you have to look back and you have to sort of think, we have to educate ourselves on what we're doing right and wrong, because in the paradigm that was Chinese medicine, when it was created, we didn't have to learn how not to destroy our circadian rhythm. We didn't have to learn to eat seasonally, because it would have been impossible to do so. And so the medicine actually, if I wish I would have a time machine, that'd be the first thing that I would go back and want to observe, is how the efficacy of Chinese medicine and acupuncture was probably a lot more. But the efficacy of pretty much anything would have been a lot more because of the environment really bogging us down. But I prioritize patient education because I want people to know on this platform as well, there's no one else that's in the driver's seat of your health. I don't care what smart guy that talks really well, that knows how to explain this, that, and the third that you hire, that puts you on some functional medicine test that's specified for the specific type of bacteria that are in your shit, or that you're going to go use this new exercise program that is specifically designed to put you on a gradient to having the best, metabolic function that you possibly can. It all comes down to making the right choices for yourself.
So, it's important because one, 2 things that Sarah and I really talk about and we've learned is quantified self and agency, right? And sovereignty, and being able to learn. And I think when you learn it on your own and not being told by someone else, because we often reject our parents and we reject those that we think are in authority because we think we're smarter than them, but it's actually teaching them to go find the information themselves. Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily to go find it themselves, but it's just teaching them that, just because you do exercise, that doesn't give you the right to eat a corn dog whenever you get home. And, just because I can get you on the table and do acupuncture for your anxiety doesn't give you the right to go watch a horror movie 2 or 3 times a week and expect that, you're going to be a relaxed type of personality.
It's interesting what you said about some of these therapies maybe being less effective now in these modern times because the environment is so radically different. Because I think that is one thing with herbalism or mushrooms or Chinese medicine or any of these therapeutic techniques. People want to have the result that it's kind of famous for. And it's not necessarily going to happen if you're living in an environment which is toxic with either radiation or light pollution or the wrong diet or the wrong family situation. So that is that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of people say, oh, well, I've got an excellent herbalist you could see about that. But it's kind of understanding, you can take all the herbs you like, but if you're still in this kind of toxic environment, you're not going to get the benefit. And I hadn't actually thought about Chinese medicine like that, because it's interesting to me. And I've done a lot of Kung Fu, so I kind of have learned some of the basics of that. But yes, it's just interesting that, okay, you've got to fix your environment first. Otherwise, none of these things are going to kind of have a chance.
No, otherwise you're doing Kung Fu against yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a great point. Yeah. Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way as much as we want it to. And it's all because our minds have been hijacked to believe consumerism at the end of the day. Because what that tells us what consumerism makes it out there, their modus operandi actually is to convince us that we are inadequate for ourselves.
Yes, and I suppose the more that we get, the more that we buy into it, and the more junk food that's eaten, the harder it is then to make a different choice, because your brain becomes more foggy, presumably.
But junk food's only just a very small part of the problem, actually, and I believe that junk light is a much bigger part of the problem because of the amount of energy and information that actually gets buried into it. You see, we already have all of the detoxification pathways designed to get rid of toxins and all types of pathogens in our food. We can easily fight off any type of invasion. I mean, I'm not saying that we can eat straight up poison, but we have the ability to detoxify different poisons in our food. That's why we have all these complex organs that are involved with our digestive system. But when it comes down to artificial light, we have no adaptation to avoid the deleterious effects. So you wonder why you get things like headaches, why you get things like high blood pressure, why you have chronic stress, why you have autoimmune disorders. It's because of the fact that your sleep is so screwed up, everything else behind it starts to dismantle itself. Because 1 hour of sleep prior to midnight is the equivalent of 2 hours sleep after midnight. And most people won't explain that to you. No one ever sat down and said, make sure whenever you get to college that you're not pulling any of these one-nighters and you're not going out to the bar and making the habit of actually normalizing putting your health at the last end of your priorities. No one taught us that. We're actually taught the opposite. We're taught that how you perform on a societal level, it should be your priority. And that doesn't work for 98% of people.
Yeah, it's this battle we have. And Sarah and I have talked about our culture differences between her living in London and or living in England and us here, is that we have this belief that if you're not doing something, you're lazy, or if you're doing too much of something, you're lazy. And it's this battle against laziness, which I guess ultimately goes back to consumerism, is that the more you're doing, the more you're buying, right? And it was only until they could zap everything into our houses and stream services into our houses, and that's fine. And we could buy whatever we want from home. But this idea of laziness is that if we're not staying up all night grinding and working, then we're lazy. It's not that binary. And, there's something we probably need to share with others, that like, this isn't how we should be viewing life, right? And there needs to be a kind of in between there, which is it's okay to heal.
Yeah, it's a different view of success based on how healthy and happy you are, rather than, what car you're driving. Yeah.
Yeah. What you just said is what Chinese doctors attempted to explain 500 or 600 years ago. And you can imagine how differently the way we live is affecting us compared to back then. It's 100 times more busy. And consumerism is right in your damn face, because all people do is look at their phone anyway. And they're not realizing that their perspective is being hijacked. So when you make a decision for yourself, you should really start to think, is it a decision that's for yourself, or are you making a decision for a marketer that's really trying to influence you into going a certain direction? And Mother Nature has one intention for all of us. That is harmony. That's all she's trying to do, is harmonize everything. And the way that we're creating our lives based around technology, based around misuse of resources, the obsession with the idea of performance, none of those meet that standard. So most of us need to come to reality with if we have certain issues, it has nothing to do with a defect in our biology. It has to do with a defect in our behavior and our environment. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we're coming to the end of our time, and I think we've covered a lot of really important points. What do you think you would like to leave people with? Because, you know, you've already talked about, you know, getting rid of your Wi-Fi, changing your sleep. For a lot of people, you know, that's a lot of stuff to take on at once. What would be, you know, for people who are just like at the beginning of having these realizations, what would be the one kind of take home that you would leave people with?
I would tell people, spend as much time as you possibly can in nature away from technology. That way you can get in sync with the wavelengths that designed evolution. Not only that, just be hesitant of how sensitive your sleep really is. I think the biggest things that people can do are avoid eating and avoid light at night. I mean, it sounds ridiculous because it's become so normalized, but you have to realize in nature, both of those things aren't really possible. I mean, as far as being a diurnal animal really goes, none of the other diurnal animals make those mistakes.
Yeah, make those mistakes. A good point.
So we'll go to Plato's cave to sleep, and that's it. We're not going there to empower shadows.
Daytime. Yeah,
Right.
not going to be fooled by it. Yeah.
It's incredibly helpful, and the idea of the whole self, and recognizing that we've talked a lot about individualizing these parts of the body, or these teachings, but it really is we don't spend enough time because we can hijack the diet, we can hijack the exercise, we can hijack our sleep, but it's the mental state that's the hardest part to kind of retrain. In the idea that we really need to start thinking differently, and it's turning shit off. Right, turn tech off, get out there, and kind of hit the reset button a little bit. Stare at a flower for a while. A flower is a pretty beautiful, amazing thing, right? I always love. Sometimes I'm like, had the worst week ever, and I'm out there hiking, and I'm like, where did that flower come from? It's out from the middle of nowhere. There's a flower here. I don't know. I think there's a lot of learning in that, and it's really helpful. I really appreciate the reminder that that's how we have to reset, right?
Yeah, I think it's cool, and I think that's a good point to end on, because you can't make those decisions when you're still in the environment where you're making those poor decisions. So changing the environment and getting outside is the first step to at least having the awareness and being able to make those changes. So thank you so much, Corey, for coming on. We normally do like a follow-up. We do a little review. We see how we got on doing some of the things. We're kind of already on the same trip as you, so I'm hoping so, although here I am sitting in my shitty light environment. But I'm up excited. I'm going camping this weekend, so.
Yes, she is going camping this weekend.
I'm going to the Redwoods. I'm going to the Redwoods, which is going to be awesome. So thank you very much for coming on, Corey. It's so lovely to meet you. And thanks for all the things you do.
And we find you at Optimal. Is optimallight.net the best place to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on optimallight.net or the Instagram, Facebook handle, optimallightdoc. Anything other than that, you know where I'll be. Actually, when I leave this, I have to go offset some of this staring at the screen and dealing with some of these things. I'm going to go jump in 55-degree water at the spring nearby. So,
beautiful.
Great.
Beautiful.
That's great. Yes, cold thermogenesis. We've had a bit of a chat about that, but yeah, we need to get someone on soon. Okay, Corey, you go and do your thing. It's so lovely to meet you. Thank you for taking the time and for kind of subjecting yourself for this, for our education. We really appreciate it. And I hope I get to meet you someday soon. Maybe I'm coming to Florida soon. So take care. Thank you very much. All the best.
Yeah, hopefully you'll hit me up whenever you get here. It's nice to meet you, Sarah. Nice to meet you, Russ. I'll see you guys around.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Rebel Scientist podcast. If you know someone who would benefit from the topics in this episode, share it with them. Feel free to DM us on all social media channels or email us at sarah@rebelscientist.com. We read and reply to all messages. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you're listening on a channel that allows reviews such as iTunes, please leave us a fantastic review. We value your support. It all helps. All opinions of our guests are their own opinions and do not necessarily reflect their views of Sarah Turner or Russ Eisenman. This is not medical advice. If you have a health problem, please seek a medical professional.
The Rebel Scientist podcast is a Breaking the Gray production, hosted by Sarah Turner and Russ Eisenman. Audio production by Dave Visaya and the podcast engineers. For more information and for our biohacking shopping guide, visit rebelscientist.com. To hear more incredible Breaking the Gray production podcasts, visit breakingthegray.com. That's gray with an E. breakingthegray.com.
Breaking the gray.